Hey guys, so moving on to the next set of notes, you have 2.5 notes, and these are all about one-step inequalities. So we already solved one-step equations, and then we translated, and now we're going to talk about inequalities. So you may recall seeing some of these symbols used before. So these are what all the symbols represent. If you see it's like the tip of an arrowhead pointing toward the left, then that's the less than symbol. If you see it with an equal to sign underneath, that's called the less than or equal to, or a line underneath, that's less than or equal to. If it's pointing to the right, like the tip of an arrowhead, that's the greater than symbol. And then if it's pointing to the right with a line underneath, that's called greater than or equal to. Okay, so closed circle and open circle all represent something. So when you are going to graph inequalities, if you see the greater than or equal to sign or the less than or equal to sign, so the signs with the line under them, then you're going to put a closed circle at that point because it means that it includes that number. An open circle, if you see a inequality that has the less than sign without the equal to or the greater than sign, then that's going to be an open circle because that means that it does not include that number. So when you're asked to graph an inequality, like in this first example, a greater than or equal to 7, what you are doing is you're going to graph a closed or an open dot, and then you're going to shade where it is pointing, okay? So this first one says a greater than or equal to 7. Well, the greater than or equal to symbol is a closed dot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find 7, and I'm going to put a closed dot there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shade in the direction that is going. Greater than is any number bigger than 7. So that tells me, since it's pointing to the right, that I'm going to make my arrow go to the right. And then you're done. So when you go to graph, you either do a closed or an open dot based on the inequality, and then you shade in the direction that it is pointing. So look at number 2. In number 2, it says x less than -3. Well, I know that the less than symbol is an open dot, so I'm going to put an open dot at -3. And then to figure out where I am going to shade, notice that the less than symbol points to the left. So that tells me that I'm going to shade all of the numbers that are to the left of -3 because that is all the numbers that are less than -3. And I'm going to make my arrow point in that direction. So that's graphing inequalities. Um, Next up, we have graphing compound inequalities. So there are two other types of inequalities that you will see, and these are called compound, which means that they have more than one, right? Compound is more than one. So if you have an and inequality, or you see the word and used in an inequality, then basically what you're going to do is you're going to make your two dots, however they may be. One of them may be an open and one may be a closed, or two of them may be, or they both may be closed, or they both may be open. And you're just going to fill in the line in the center. So ands connect. Ands connect. And what it's telling you is that ands is all of the numbers in between those two. Okay? Ors, on the other hand, if you see the word or, ors are going to have, again, either open or closed dots at these points, open or closed dots at these endpoints, and then they're going to go in opposite directions. So it's saying that some of them are greater than this number and some of them are less than this number, and there's no filled in between. Okay, so they go opposite directions if you see an or. Okay, so when you go to graph these, you have the first example says x is greater than -5 and x is less than -3. That's what that one says, okay? So first, I'm going to put my dots down. So for the first one, I have x is greater than -5. So all I'm going to do is I know that that is an open circle because it has no line under it. So I'm just going to put an open circle at -5, and I'm just going to not draw anything quite yet, okay? In the next one, it says x is less than -3. Okay, so again, I'm just going to put that that is an open circle at -3. Then what I'm going to do is, since this is an and inequality, all I'm going to do is connect these two dots, and then my answer is graphed. Okay, so figure out if it's open or closed circle, and then connect the dots if it's an and. If it's an or, like in our other example, then make sure that your lines go opposite directions because or is one or the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the first one you have x less than -8. So that one is going to be an open dot at -8. And in the second one you have x greater than 4. So that is another open dot at 4. And now our lines are going to go opposite directions. So I'm going to shade in to the left, and then I'm going to shade in to the right of that one so that they are never touching and they're going opposite directions. Okay? So now that we've done a little graphing of inequalities, now we're actually going to solve one-step inequalities, okay? So just like we were solving one-step equations, same thing. You ask yourself, what's happening? What's happening to the variable? So what's happening to x? And then you do the opposite. So the opposite operation, right? So the opposite of times is division, and the opposite of adding is subtracting, okay? So we're going to get all sorts of different problems with this, but the most important piece to remember when you're dealing with inequalities is that there is going to be a selection. You have to pick which inequality you want, which symbol you want. And here is the most important rule here. When you are multiplying or dividing each side of an inequality by a negative number, you must flip the symbol. Okay? So negative number means you flip the symbol the other direction. So let's look at a few of these examples. In the first one, you have 23 is greater than or equal to v minus 3. Okay? What's happening to the variable? It's being subtracted by 3. So I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to add 3 to both sides, just like if this were an equation. So when I add 3 to both sides, I get 26 is greater than or equal to v. Final answer. That's it. One step to get this, and that's how I write my answer. Please make sure that you input the same inequality sign into Alex when you are working on this, okay? In the next one, we have, in number 2, we have 18 is greater than -19 plus v. Remember, same when we're solving one-step equations. If there is a negative sign out front of the number, then that is telling you that it is a negative number, and in order to do the opposite and solve this, we have to add, okay? So I'm going to add 19 to both sides because it is a -19. And when I do so, I've got 18 plus 19 is 37. I still have the greater than symbol because I didn't multiply or divide by a negative, and then I'm left with v. There's my answer, 37 greater than v. And you have to write it in that order. You do not have to flip it around. You can input it just like that. In the next one, we have some multiplying and dividing going on, right? So what's happening to the variable? It is being multiplied by a -3. So to get rid of the -3, I'm going to do the opposite and I'm going to divide. Okay? Now watch what happens. I'm left with u, but I divided by a negative number, right? I divided by a -3. So remember, that tells me that I need to flip the inequality. Okay? So I'm going to flip the inequality in my answer, and instead of a greater than symbol, it's just going to be a less than symbol. -12 divided by -3 is 4. There's our final answer, u less than 4. Okay? Look at example number 4 in the next one. We have -45 is less than 5d. Okay? 5, what's happening to the variable? It's being multiplied by 5. So I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to divide both sides by 5. Now, since 5 is not a negative number, it has no effect on my inequality symbol. So my final answer here would be -45 divided by 5 is -9. Keep the less than symbol because it didn't get divided by a negative, and keep the d. There's your final answer. Okay? In number 5, what's happening to the variable? V is being divided by 2. Remember, the fraction symbol means dividing. So in order to get rid of the dividing by 2, I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. When I do that, I'm left with v, no inequality change, it's still less than or equal to because I didn't multiply by a negative, And negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. B less than or equal to negative 8. And then in the last one, we have 3 greater than or equal to negative c over 4. I'm going to rewrite this equation to start off so that you can see where the negative applies, okay? So whenever you see a negative symbol out front, apply it to the number that is in the equation. So really this equation can look like this: 3 greater than or equal to c divided by negative 4. So I'm just going to apply it to that 4 in the bottom because that's the number in our situation. Now what I have is c is being divided by a negative 4. So I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to times both sides by the negative 4. Now, since I am timesing by a negative or multiplying by a negative, that tells me that I need to flip my symbol, okay? So when I go to write my answer, I'm going to say negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, and I'm going to flip my inequality because of the negative number that I multiplied by. So I'm going to make it a less than or equal to sign, and then c is on that side. So our final answer is going to be negative 12 less than or equal to c. So again, if you're reminded at the bottom, highlight each problem where you had to flip the negative. I already highlighted it for you as I went through. Notice that it is when you divide by a negative. Whenever you flip, whenever you have to flip the symbol is when you multiply or divide by a negative number. And when you put in your answers for these, you have to put them in as inequalities. Okay? All right, so try the practice in Alex, and as always, let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.